Grant Amato, a former nurse from Florida, was sentenced to life in prison in 2019 after murdering his parents and brother when they confronted him about stealing $200,000 of their money to fund his obsession with a Bulgarian cam girl. But even behind bars, his name resurfaced in a twisted new plot. In 2024, Victoria Goodwin, the wife of Ghost Adventures star Aaron Goodwin, fell in love with Amato after watching a documentary about his crimes and began messaging him from prison. But their conversations turned deadly when she confessed that she didn't want to divorce, but instead wanted her husband killed, pooling over $11,000 with Amato to hire a hitman and even sending him details of her husband's routine. The plot collapsed when prison officials intercepted Amato's phone, exposing the conspiracy and leading to Victoria's arrest in March of 2025. In court, Aaron Goodwin faced his wife who tried to have him assassinated, while Victoria, strangely enamored with a family-annihilating simp, was sentenced to several years in prison. Once Hollywood's ultimate action hero, Bruce Willis is now trapped in a devastating real-life decline. In 2022, he was diagnosed with aphasia, a disorder that stripped him of the ability to understand or speak language. And by 2023, his family revealed that it was the early stage of frontotemporal dementia, a rare and brutal brain disease that erodes memory, personality, and communication until the patient no longer recognizes their loved ones. On film sets before his retirement, Willis was already struggling. He needed lines fed through an earpiece, often forgot entire scenes, and at times fired prop guns without warning, all while being pushed into low-budget cameos that cashed in on his fading star power. Now at just 69, the man who once embodied invincibility in Die Hard is slowly being undone by his own brain, unable to even grasp that he was once one of Hollywood's most iconic stars, while his family prepares for the cruel reality of watching one of the most charismatic voices in cinema fall silent forever. In April of 2025, 44-year-old Felix Rojas boarded a late-night New York City subway and spotted 44-year-old Jorge Gonzalez slumped dead in his seat, believed to have collapsed from natural causes. But instead of calling for help, Rojas did the unthinkable. He first rummaged through the man's pockets for valuables, then dragged his lifeless body to the floor, pulled down the man's pants, and assaulted him. Surveillance showed him pausing the assault each time the train reached a station, only to resume once the doors closed, carefully timing his abuse to avoid being caught. Weeks later, police identified Rojas from the footage and he surrendered, accused of one of the most grotesque crimes ever caught on a New York City subway. Just 2 years after filming Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick killed 2 women while driving on the wrong side of the road in Ireland. He said he had no recollection of the incident and got off with a $175 fine. A male gorilla named Michael learned sign language and once used it to describe his mother being shot and killed by poachers. 2 years ago, a distress message was found in a can of sardines saying, "We are Sudanese laborers enslaved by this company." An investigation was opened by Egyptian authorities, but nothing ever came of it. Genghis Khan would marry off one of his daughters to the king of an allied nation and then assign his new son-in-law to military duty. As Khan expected, most of these son-in-laws would die in combat, giving his daughters complete control over these nations. While Keanu Reeves was filming The Matrix, his daughter was stillborn at 8 months. The tragedy caused he and his girlfriend to break up shortly before she was killed in a car crash. Since then, he has donated most of his earnings from movies and has avoided serious relationships and having kids. In the 1500s, Mapuche warrior Galvarino had both his hands cut off as punishment for defying the Spanish. He returned home, raised an army, and fought the Spanish with blades tied to the stubs of his hands. Khalif Browder was imprisoned at Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial after allegedly stealing a backpack. He spent 730 days alone in solitary confinement whilst awaiting his trial. He was finally released in 2013 after his innocence was proven. China is developing a humanoid robot that can carry a fetus in an artificial womb, where the baby would float in synthetic fluid, sustained by nutrient tubes and monitored by sensors, before being expelled by hydraulics at birth. The first prototype is planned for 2026, priced around $14,000, and will give people the chance to have children without enduring the risks or pain of pregnancy. Supporters argue it could help women who can't safely carry babies, but critics warn it strips away the human bond of gestation and could mark the beginning of childbirth being outsourced to machines. In 1988, Clarence Moses L. was sentenced to 48 years in prison after a rape victim told police that she saw his face in a dream and decided that he was the attacker. No physical evidence tied him to the crime, and police even destroyed the DNA that could have proven his innocence. For nearly 3 decades, he sat behind bars while the real rapist walked free until that man finally confessed. But by then, Clarence had already lost 28 years of his life to a conviction built on nothing more than a dream. A former FBI agent has claimed that Tupac's boss Suge Knight financed the murder of Biggie in 1997. The intended target was actually Biggie's boss Sean P. Diddy Combs, who was in the car in front of Biggie at the time. In 2015, Airbnb held a contest where the winner got to spend the night in the Paris catacombs, which hold the remains of 6 million people. In 1915, the U.S. Postal Service banned the mailing of people after a 4-year-old girl was sent across the state of Idaho by her parents. A man whose headaches were so painful they made him vomit has finally found the source of his problem. A tapeworm has been lodged in his brain for 10 years after eating undercooked pork in Mexico. Babe Ruth, baseball's greatest legend, lived a life steeped in excess and tragedy. Orphaned at just 7 when his parents abandoned him to a reform school, his only real father figure was a strict monk who taught him baseball. Years later, his real father died during a bloody street fight, cracking his skull on a Baltimore curb. As Ruth rose to fame, his bottomless appetite for hot dogs, whiskey, and women wrecked his health, earning him syphilis rumors in a near-death collapse in 1925 that newspapers dubbed the bellyache heard around the world, after he allegedly gorged on a dozen hot dogs and beers in one sitting before collapsing. In his final years, Babe's booming voice was silenced by a rare and brutal throat cancer, leaving him unable to eat or speak before it finally killed him at just 53 years old. When his body was laid out in Yankee Stadium, more than 77,000 fans piled past his corpse in the house that Ruth built, saying goodbye to a baseball legend who was ultimately undone by his own appetites. One of France's biggest streamers has died after live streaming for nearly 300 hours straight. Jean Pormanov, a 46-year-old kick streamer, died on camera in August of 2025 after a staggering 298-hour live stream filled with months of escalating abuse. Known online for bizarre endurance streams, he became the target of cruel content orchestrated by his co-hosts and egged on by donations. Slapped, strangled, suffocated with plastic bags, shocked with electricity, mocked in humiliating costumes, and deprived of sleep. Shortly before his death, he wrote to his mother, "I feel like I'm kidnapped. I want to get out of here, but the other guy won't let me. He's keeping me locked in." Just days later, he died in his sleep during the marathon stream. French prosecutors are now investigating his collaborators for deliberate violence and exploitation, while Kick, the platform hosting the stream, faces global outrage for failing to stop it. What viewers thought was twisted entertainment turned out to be the slow public destruction of a man. In 2021, Miss Zhang from Weifang, China, underwent a routine double eyelid cosmetic procedure, but during the operation, she felt extremely uncomfortable in her left eye, only to later discover that her eyeball had been accidentally sewn to the outer corner of her eyelid. Despite stitch removal, a thin thread-like tether still remained between her eyeball and eyelid. Attempts to surgically detach them failed, causing her eye to become inflamed and fused once again. She's now left with blurred vision and severely limited eye movement, able to move her eye only by turning her entire head. In December of 24, 46-year-old Nurhawati Zahora was ambushed by a 13-foot crocodile while washing her feet in murky Indonesian waters. The reptile quickly dragged her under in a brutal death roll, spilling her blood into the water as horrified villagers could only watch. Nearly an hour later, it resurfaced with her lifeless body clamped in its jaws, forcing locals to toss raw chickens into the water to distract it before they could recover her remains. Witnesses described the scene as worse than hell, and authorities later hunted down and shot the crocodile. John Jessup, a once respected politician in Indiana, did the unspeakable to his own daughter while celebrating her 21st birthday in Las Vegas. The former Hancock County Commissioner pleaded guilty to attempted sexual assault after allegedly getting his daughter extremely drunk before assaulting her back at their hotel. Prosecutors say Jessup provided her with multiple Long Island iced teas, took her to a strip club where she became so incapacitated she needed a wheelchair ride back to the hotel, and later assaulted her while she was unconscious. He was sentenced in 2025 to 6 to 25 years in prison, must register as a sex offender, and is barred from all contact with his daughter for life. Carlos Haffy Rodriguez was ejected through a windshield in a drug-fueled crash as a teenager, smashing his skull so badly that surgeons had to remove the entire upper half of it, leaving his brain covered only by skin. Incredibly, he survived without any severe cognitive damage, but went on to rack up arrests for drugs, arson, and other crimes, his caved-in head becoming one of the internet's most infamous mugshots. Here's a photo of tobacco company CEOs declaring under oath that nicotine is not addictive. The moment became infamous when internal documents later revealed that tobacco executives had known for decades about nicotine's highly addictive properties and had even manipulated nicotine levels in cigarettes to enhance dependency. In 18th century Europe, the wealthy often devoured sugar with no real dental care, rotting their teeth into black stumps that often fell out. To keep up appearances, they wore dentures, not wooden as legend claims, but often filled with real human teeth. These were bought from the poor, pulled from slaves or prisoners, or scavenged from battlefields, sometimes still bloody from fallen soldiers. With no concept of sterilization, they could carry infections, even syphilis, into the wearer's mouth. In advanced cases, the disease could slowly eat away at the face, collapsing the nose and leaving a grotesque hollow mask where features used to be. LeVar Ball, father of NBA stars Lonzo and LaMelo, nearly died in early 2025 after a diabetic infection in his foot spread to his bloodstream. Multiple surgeries followed, first removing toes, then his foot, and finally amputating his leg below the knee along with 4 blood transfusions. At one point, he was in so much pain that he told his doctors to let him die, but his sons pushed him to fight. Now he uses the ordeal to warn others about ignoring symptoms and the dangers of unmanaged diabetes. In 2017, 25-year-old Akbar Salubiro suddenly vanished after harvesting palm oil in a remote Indonesian village. The next day, locals found a 23-foot-long reticulated python nearby with an unnaturally swollen belly. Fearing the worst, they cut the snake open and pulled out Akbar's fully clothed body still intact. Experts believe the snake ambushed him as he was walking home, constricted him to death, and swallowed him whole because he was alone in a forested area where large prey was scarce. It was the first confirmed and fully documented case of a human being swallowed whole by a python, with graphic photos and videos of the recovery sparking worldwide horror. In August of 2023, Lil Tay's Instagram suddenly announced that she and her brother had died, sparking worldwide shock online. But within a day, she appeared alive, calling the post a cruel hack. Meta confirmed her account had been compromised, but suspicions lingered. Tay publicly accused her estranged father of planting the hoax, while others believe her brother staged it for attention. Then in 2024, she revealed that she'd been diagnosed with an actual life-threatening heart tumor and underwent successful open heart surgery, posting photos from her hospital bed. In 1978, 22-year-old art student Harold Brown fell 324 feet, nearly 30 stories, through the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco after crawling into a ventilation shaft. A guard who witnessed the fall swore he heard Brown yelling "whoopee" on the way down, as if enjoying the plunge. Against all odds, Brown survived the impact on the concrete base with both legs shattered, kneecaps destroyed, and a crushed heel bone, but no internal injuries. Minutes later, he regained consciousness and shocked rescuers by singing Camptown Races as they carried him out. If a baby dies on the Indonesian island of Tanah Toraja, the family cuts a hole in a tree and places the body inside. The tree then grows around the baby and absorbs it. After World War II, French women who had affairs with German soldiers were publicly shaved bald. This was done so that everyone could see who had betrayed their country. In 2007, Joseph Swain from Delaware filed a lawsuit against his doctors after a horrific surgical mix-up. An apparently botched routine colostomy left him pissing out of his ass and pooping from his pecker. When North Korea was battling food shortages, Kim Jong-un ordered his citizens to give up their dogs. Authorities went door to door, forcefully confiscating all canines, which were then sold to meat markets to be eaten. This is the world's heaviest woman in 1922 as compared to the world's heaviest person today. A Japanese ice rink once put 5,000 dead fish in their ice so that their customers could skate over a frozen ocean. The attraction was closed immediately after public outrage. An Iranian woman underwent 50 surgeries and dropped to 90 pounds in a catastrophic attempt to look like Angelina Jolie. While filming The Wizard of Oz, 16-year-old Judy Garland was put on quite the extreme diet. It consisted of chicken soup, coffee, and roughly 80 cigarettes per day. Through her grandmother Mary, Queen Elizabeth is a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. This technically makes Prince Charles the heir to Dracula's bloodline. The urine of a diabetic contains so much sugar that it can be purified and made into a high-end single malt whiskey. Rabies is such a deadly disease that you're more likely to survive being shot in the head. Only 14 people in recorded medical history have ever survived rabies, and all of them suffered permanent brain damage. There are tiny bugs closely related to spiders living in the pores of your face, which crawl onto your face to mate while you're sleeping. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams to study the effects of climate change. They ended up accidentally killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. 26-year-old streamer Natalie Reynolds became widely hated across the internet after convincing a homeless woman to jump into Austin's Lady Bird Lake despite knowing she couldn't swim.
There's a scanner that you need to look for in the water.
Really?
Yeah.
What if I drown?
Then
I haven't been in the water. What is
you said you want to jump in.
I do kind of want to jump in.
I'm first set certified.
Huh?
I'm first set.
And I'm scuba.
Jump in
I'm
with my sandals
I'm
on.
scuba certified. You should jump in.
All right.
When the woman started screaming for help and nearly drowned, Reynolds laughed and fled the scene instead of helping and never called 911.
She says she's drowning. We leave.
Oh, this is bad. Dude, Natalie.
Dude, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She said she's drowning. She says she's drowning.
I think you literally just murdered a lady.
No, I didn't. I swear.
I think you
No, I didn't. Let's go. Dude, she's drowning in the lake.
Firefighters had to dive in and pull the woman from the water as she thrashed and sank, just moments away from dying right in front of them. Reynolds later denied encouraging the jump, dismissed the backlash as overblown, and arrogantly told her followers it would blow over within a week, while even joking about getting clout from the drama on a private stream. The internet erupted with fury, calling her a heartless, fame-hungry sociopath who treats suffering as entertainment, cementing her reputation as one of the most despised streamers online. A baby girl named Lexi Robbins is slowly turning into a stone due to a rare genetic condition. The incurable illness called FOP gradually turns muscle tissue into bone. During the 1910s, there was an American baseball team completely consisting of death row inmates. As long as they kept winning, their executions were delayed. This is what 28 years of sun damage did to the left side of a trucker's face. This photo taken in 1955 showcases the exact moment a couple realized their 18-month-old son was swept away by the current. The award-winning photographer said this photo deeply affected him for the rest of his life, for he was a father too. On Thanksgiving Day in 1980, Priscilla Ford steered her Lincoln Continental onto a crowded Reno sidewalk, mowing down dozens of pedestrians because she claimed a voice in her head told her to, killing 6 people and injuring 23 more in the chaos. Later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, she showed no remorse in court, and though initially sentenced to death, her punishment was reduced to life in prison. Ford spent the next 25 years behind bars before dying there in 2005. In 2019, an obese, wheelchair-bound American passenger on an EVA air flight from Los Angeles to Taiwan totally humiliated the crew by demanding help in the restroom, then forcing a female flight attendant to wipe him after absolutely nuking the toilet. With the door open, he allegedly moaned in pleasure and urged her on, saying, "Deeper, deeper," while she carried out the degrading task. The incident sparked outrage in Taiwan, led to a fine against EVA Air for failing to protect its staff, and left the attendant in tears as she described the ordeal at a press conference. In July of 2024, Carol Hunt, the wife of BBC racing commentator John Hunt, and their 2 daughters Louise and Hannah were brutally killed inside their own home in England by Louise's ex-boyfriend Kyle Clifford. Armed with a butcher knife and a crossbow, Clifford first stabbed 61 Carol to death at the front door, then waited for Louise, whom he restrained, raped, and held captive for over 2 hours before killing her with the crossbow. Minutes later, Hannah arrived home only to be shot as well. Fatally wounded, she still managed to raise the alarm before collapsing in the doorway. Clifford then fled and turned the bow on himself, surviving but left paralyzed. In 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of the murders and rape. The crime devastated the remaining Hunt family. John and his daughter Amy were left to grieve 3 women described as kind, joyful, and compassionate, while Clifford, once welcomed into their lives, exposed himself as nothing more than a violent predator. At age 15, David Bowie was punched in the eye by his best friend during a fight over a girl, causing serious damage to his vision and leaving his pupil permanently dilated. The injury gave him his iconic mismatched stare, but also left him nearly half blind, with blurred vision and terrible depth perception for the rest of his life. In Florida, a rescued otter named Splashed is being trained to sniff out human remains underwater. Unlike cadaver dogs, he can dive into murky waters where bodies are often impossible to find, sometimes because alligators drag corpses away and jam them under logs to hide them for later feeding. Splash can follow the scent through the water and mark the exact location. In 2020, 89-year-old British beekeeper Ron Hoskins lost everything in a suspected arson attack. For 2 decades, he'd been breeding super bees resistant to deadly mites, hoping to save collapsing bee populations worldwide. But vandals suddenly torched his greenhouse and shed, destroying his microscopes, generators, protective suits, and years of meticulous breeding records, while also wrecking dozens of hives containing the very colonies he had developed. Despite a police appeal for witnesses, no suspects were ever found, and in a single night, his life's mission to protect the future of bees was reduced to ashes by perpetrators that remain unknown. In 2023, longtime Mr. Beast co-star Chris Tyson realized he was actually a woman and started hormone therapy, a move that coincided with the collapse of his marriage and leaving behind his young son and wife. Just a year later, Tyson's life spiraled further when allegations surfaced that he had exchanged inappropriate messages with someone as young as 13, accusations that spread across the internet like wildfire. He stepped away from the Mr. Beast brand, apologized publicly, and stepped away from social media as headlines branded him as a predator. Mr. Beast himself also distanced from his former friend and launched an independent investigation. By late 2024, a law firm concluded the claims were baseless, but Tyson's reputation was already destroyed. He's now remembered much less for a decade of YouTube success with Mr. Beast, and more for transition controversy, family upheaval, and a fake scandal that essentially ended his career. As of now, there's no confirmed word that Chris Tyson will be rejoining Mr. Beast anytime soon. In the 1960s, Michael Jackson's father Joseph wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So one night when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through his window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. According to a survey, more than half of all commercial pilots have fallen asleep during a flight. 29% of these pilots claim they've woken up before and seen the co-pilot asleep as well. In 2010, a Polish man wanted doctors to remove a years-long cyst on the back of his head. Upon further examination, doctors found that the cyst was actually a .22 caliber bullet lodged in his scalp. He hadn't noticed it because he was drunk at the party where he was likely shot 5 years earlier. In 2001, the FBI warned Russell Crowe that Al-Qaeda was planning to kidnap him as part of a cultural destabilization plot. For 2 years, the FBI publicly guarded Crowe and refused to give him any details on the threat. Medical mistakes kill over 250,000 Americans each year. If they were a disease, they'd be the third leading cause of death in the U.S. behind cancer and heart disease. Jim Creighton was the first baseball superstar according to historians. In 1862, he swung so hard into a home run that he ruptured his bladder and died. Titanic designer Thomas Andrews was on board the ship when it sank. His original design included more safety features such as watertight compartments and twice as many lifeboats. But his ideas were rejected since they'd make the boat appear less attractive. He spent his last moments trying to evacuate passengers and his body was never recovered. In 2011, a 17-year-old Chinese boy sold his kidney on the black market so that he could buy the new iPhone and iPad. 8 years later, the man's other kidney failed and now he's bedridden for life. The men in white are the surviving members of the original San Francisco Gay Men's Choir. The rest represent those who were lost to AIDS. American Airlines assured a blind woman that they would help her off the plane after the other passengers had gotten off. They then proceeded to forget about her and locked the plane while she was still inside. In 2013, a Clemson student ran an experiment to help turtles safely cross roads. So he placed a fake turtle in the road to observe driver behavior and accidentally discovered something disturbing. He found that 6% of people deliberately went out of their way to hit the turtle.